to me, part of the gratitude is that I wouldn't be where I am today without obstacles, challenges,
Mm.
hurdles, barriers, roadblocks, whatever we want to call them. My toughest times, have brought me to some of my greatest lessons. And so obviously I know that's the result or the outcome, and why, when you're going through a storm, you have to somehow look for some level of faith or trust in whatever your beliefs are. I think that the one area that on how I really choose to be grateful is it really is like very much about the intention, and you can choose. Your thoughts control your feelings, and so change your thought, get a different emotion, feel a different feeling.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the lovely Kerry Preston. Kerry is the founder of Growtality, an executive and business coaching company that focuses on leadership development and team performance. She is a thought leader in this industry and is the author of the book Enhancing Your Executive Edge. She is a passionate endurance athlete, having run 13 marathons, 2 half Ironman races, and most recently completed a full Ironman. What I personally love about this conversation is Kerry's passion for growth and vitality. On our path to achievement, it is so easy to face a setback and feel like we are no longer progressing, or we put everything into our goals and feel fatigued because we have lost touch with why we are doing what we are doing. It is in this podcast that Kerry shares the importance of goal setting, how thoughts control your outcome, the power of visualization both in achievement and in overcoming setbacks, and how you can use positivity as a strategic lens to attain all that you desire in life. I first met Kerry in a Siri Linley mastermind. See episode 4 if you would like to know more about this phenomenal woman. So it comes as no surprise that Kerry shares her values of authenticity, passion, and being of service to others. If you are looking to be fulfilled in your life, this is the conversation for you. Please enjoy this conversation with the beautiful Kerry Preston. Welcome to the podcast, Kerry.
Thank you, Jennah-Louise. I'm so excited to spend some time with you.
So, Kerry, where I want to start is with your life's purpose to inspire others. I think it is just so incredibly beautiful. And, as friends, we've spoken a lot about this. And I saw something on your social media this morning that I thought, I think that would be a great place to start. And you said, I want to inspire people. I want someone to look at me and say, because of you, I didn't give up. So what I would love to know is sort of going back to your earlier days when you were growing up. Who was that person for you that really inspired you to not give up?
Wow, that's such a great question to start with, Jennah-Louise. And it's funny because it truly is my purpose in life. Obviously I value human connection, and I'm so grateful to be on this podcast to be human. But when I think of inspiration and really serving others, it truly is like what we learned in our formative years. And I really have two people that I would like to start with. My one special woman in my life, my Aunt Mary Lou, who is a nun. Sister Faith is her name.
Beautiful.
And she is 92. But I can remember her life's purpose was to serve and through charity. And at 16 years old, she entered the convent. She left her family, but she just did. Her modeling was such I can't even think of the words. Like, it was just a bright light, and it was service, but it was achievement. It was the ripple. It was just how she touched people. And so in one way that really just, I can remember that she took care of her mother, my mom, and every weekend. So she would, be in the convent, and then she would get a weekend off, and she'd cover for caregivers that were caring for my grandmother at the time. She just was selfless. And so that to me is achievement. Like, that to me is service. And that was my formative years for sure. The other person is really my father. And growing up, I was the youngest of 9 children, and he really had to work and work hard. And so at an early age, that was part of our upbringing. I can remember being in 2nd grade and my father saying, you could go to the hospital and sell the newspapers to patients, the Courier News, for 25 cents. And sure enough, like my brother Tommy and I would get up on Saturday mornings, fold the newspaper, walk up and down the hallways. And it felt so rewarding to get like a nickel of a tip in the US, like just to get rewarded with a little bit. We would go, we called it like bellying up to the hospital shop and buy a milkshake at the end of our work. But it was truly at that early age that I realized that, part of achieving is doing the work, but there was another spark in me, which was the way that people lit up when they were lonely and they were in the hospital and didn't have anyone to visit them. And they were lit up because they were getting the newspaper, so they could have something, and maybe there was a comic in there, or maybe there was news in there, but also it just was a feeling. It was a heart connection to look someone in the eyes. And so that was also like kind of blending the 2 levels of achievement.
Yeah, it sounds so beautiful. And as you mentioned, you are the youngest of 9 siblings, which is quite a feat in itself. I'd love to know, because I know that, your experience as being the youngest of 9 siblings has so profoundly impacted your life to this day and the work that you do. What are some of the lessons that you learned sort of being the youngest?
So there's probably 3 big lessons. One is, the lesson of what it takes to be with a lot of people is a communication skill. And so listening is probably one of the bigger lessons, because it's I guess as the youngest for me, everyone's trying to tell a story. Everyone wants to be seen and heard. Everybody's talking. Everybody has needs, right? And we weren't always pretty. I mean, it's a doggy dog world. Like, it's not an easy communication. But the first one is just like learning how to insert your voice, learning how to communicate, and learning how to listen. So it's like the tango, right? You kind of have to work together and do that dance. So I think that the communication skill by far was one. The other lesson is really, if you think about living with a lot of people with a lot of demands and a lot of needs, it's also, and this is not always a positive, but like how to make others happy. For me, at least as the youngest, if there was conflict, I learned how to find harmony. And not to say that everything is going to be swept under the carpet, but I was always looking for consensus, like trying to figure out where there was like the Venn diagram, where there was some crossover, so trying to find harmony, I think, was a lesson for me in growing up in a large family. And then the third is really navigating chaos, because there was a lot, like my life. I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful for my parents. Like, we really did we're very fortunate. But when you have kids and there was a lot of different things in my life, whether it was alcoholism, drug addiction, just conflict, there was chaos with a lot of people.
Only share as much as you're comfortable, but there was alcoholism and drug addiction within your family. What did you sort of learn throughout that experience of seeing those close to you sort of go down that path?
I learned how to be a control freak.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I as an adult now, I'm really learning like how important it is to know what's in your control and know what's not in your control, and letting go of being a people pleaser, which has been a long battle for me, just because I'm learning. But I think that when you watch things that are out of your control, it sometimes, at least for me, wanted me to be able to like impact in some way or influence in some way. But really, I think now today, the lesson is people have to do the work themselves. Really, like, and that's the way it is.
And as like a former, like, as you say, like control freak, I feel like a lot of us can relate to you in this situation. How did you sort of develop the capacity to kind of let go of that control and enable people to kind of make the choices in their life that they make that you may, personally and subjectively feel like are not good for them?
You know what? It's interesting. Like the impact for me was it also created anxiety, worry, and fear, which if you think
Mm.
about those emotions, they're quite opposite of other than the shirt I'm wearing today, which is love, which is, trying to find that juicy, hot pink heart that like when I can connect to my heart and get out of my head and really, not sit in like worry, angst, fear, I am a completely different human. Things work out. I'm open. We've all heard like get in your head and you're dead. But the reality is like that to me is probably the downside was that it just created more fear. So even as I have three beautiful children of my own who are now 22, 20, and almost 16, I really had to work hard. And Surrey, I believe, was a really strong, helpful influence on this. That would they want me worrying? Like, would they want me sitting in that space? And so through my formative years, and again, I was blessed that my parents both went into AA and got sober. My brother was a heroin addict. He, spent a lot of time in and out of methadone clinics, but he got clean. And so, when I look to like how, even as I entered into my 20s, my life did start to like, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned. So, and things did start to like, I saw the hope and the possibility that people can do the work and change. So I think that there's two connections here. One is I have to really make sure that I don't sit in that like fear, angst, or worry because it's control. And I can't do that. I have to have faith. I have to live in a beautiful state and brighten up
Beautiful.
my heart and live in that space. It unlocks so much. So I think that that's probably really important. And then the other part of that is gratitude. Because really, like you can't sit in gratitude and fear at the same time.
Right.
Like just doesn't work.
And how do you feel like is best to be able to practice that? Because I feel like a lot of us understand that, like, if you are in that state of gratitude, it is, you are not experiencing that fear or worry sort of experience. But when you're in that moment of like high stress and concern, there is a lot of resistance and pushback to actually sort of dropping into that space of gratitude.
And you've taught me, I mean, we've talked a lot about resistance and like stepping into what is the resistance. And I'm grateful for that. To me, part of the gratitude is that I wouldn't be where I am today without obstacles, challenges, hurdles, barriers, roadblocks, whatever we want to call them. My toughest times, have brought me to some of my greatest lessons. And so obviously I know that's the result or the outcome and why, when you're going through a storm, you have to somehow look for some level of faith or trust in whatever your beliefs are. I think that the one area that on how I really choose to be grateful is it really is like very much about the intention, and you can choose your thoughts control your feelings. And so change your thought, get a different emotion, feel a different feeling. And it's really noticing those thoughts and acknowledging it. Like, why am I feeling angry right now? I'm noticing like I'm suddenly getting short-tempered and angry. Okay, well, what's the anger? And kind of looking at it from, if I don't want to be angry, what am I looking to? Maybe I need to be more resourceful. Maybe I need to be more level-headed. And so I try to notice it and label it so that I set a different thought in play, and then I have a different feeling, then I take a different action and I get a different result. So I use this acronym called TFAR, which I wish I could say who I could give credit to. But as you know, with all the books you've read on personal growth and development, everybody repackages it in some way, shape, or form. But the simple acronym, because I'm I'm a visual person, is your thoughts control your feelings, which drive your actions, which equal your results. So if you shift like an emotion or a feeling or a thought, I should say, you can totally change the outcome. So to me, it's like, okay, I still do get those feelings. We can't be perfect. I'm a big believer in like the ta-da, like, all right, I just had like a really bad moment, reverse, let me go back and own it. And then say, let me try again. I don't want to be that person in this moment. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I absolutely agree. And, you mentioned just before about sort of how your obstacles and like overcoming these adversities has led to some of your greatest lessons. And I certainly know some of your greatest achievements. And I know sort of one aspect of your life is that in terms of marathons and Ironmans, and sort of moving into that space of your first marathon, there's quite a beautiful story and courageous story and resilient story in relation to this. Could you please share with us that?
Absolutely. So I was never, I played sports in high school, like field hockey, but I was, the B team and not super athletic, did never devote a ton of time. Then fast forward to having 3 children and feeling like overweight, unhappy with my level of movement. And my one sister said to me, Kerry, don't worry, your kids are young. When they get older, you'll do something. And I just remember feeling really like I was hitting a wall with my own energy level and state. So I started walking with neighbors, and I slowly started walking and running, walking and running, walking and running. You get the story, couch to 5K. And, but I really still hadn't been a big involved in any type of endurance events. And my brother, Tommy, who I was super close with, we were 15 months apart, died in a snowmobile accident on a Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2009. And I can remember standing in my kitchen and getting that phone call. I was making my 3-year-old a peanut butter sandwich at the time, and just had never felt such deep pain and loss. And so that was like a moment. And I remember, like, obviously it's a defining moment, but I then 2 weeks later was just feeling like I was getting back on my feet. I had to, like, at that time, call my parents and tell them, and, you do the whole thing. Everybody has loss in their life. It's just brutal. And then 2 weeks later, my father dropped dead unexpectedly of a heart attack. So I lost 2 immediate family members in a matter of 2 weeks. And it was a really dark place. And it was through running. Like, I realized that I could actually go outside and bawl my brains out and cry, and then, like, come back and feel like a little bit of, like, myself, like a little bit of the pain was lifted. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't consistent, but I did start to, like, feel that. And I had started running more and more. And so one day I was on a trail with my running friend, Suzanne, and we've done all our marathons together. And I said, should we do a marathon? And basically decided that I needed something really uncomfortable, out of my comfort zone, that would scare me, that could give a focus. And so, on a little side note, I recently learned, which I know you're going to love this, Jennah-Louise, because you and I have had some conversations, deep conversations. And I modified this story, but I recently learned of, like, this story about running towards the roar, like run towards the roar. And I won't go into the details because there's different meanings, but to me, it was like, and it was through somebody else's experience. But if you feel the pain, like, running towards the roar is like going towards the lion, and most people run away, but then the lioness is on the other side going to hunt you, and whatever. But if you run towards the roar, like, if a song comes on the radio and you feel pain because it's associated with the loss of someone that you loved, like, stay on that song and, like, feel it. That's like running towards the lion or running towards the roar. And it connected recently to me. I didn't know it at the time, but that's how I got involved with the marathons, was that it was like feeling the feelings that actually really helped me learn to just cherish all the beautiful memories and moments from the 2 people in my family that I loved, that I lost.
Yeah, that's so incredibly beautiful. And I think so many of us, particularly when it comes to going into the more endurance space, can relate to that sort of, like, I feel like it is such a healing practice, the practice of running and doing long distance events. And I think it's incredibly special as to sort of, how it initiated, and the dedication that you can have towards something like this. I feel like, in almost a legacy of, your family members that have been lost as well. I always find, and, I know you can relate to this, as, like, finding the lesson, or, something to be grateful in some of our hardest times. And that certainly seemed to have changed sort of the trajectory of your life, and continues to now.
Yes. And owning, I was just going to build on that, because I think it is, for me, for a few years, it was a story that was, like, not to say poor me, but I was caught up in the dwelling of, like, the dark side of the story, versus, like, sometimes, I'm now able to listen to other people and, like, allow them to feel the pain that they're feeling, where maybe earlier I couldn't do that. So I think it's learning also, and taking ownership of your choices on your emotion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In relation to marathons, to my understanding, I think you've done about 13 now, which is just absolutely incredible. I'd love for you to share more of the story of how you sort of seem to do so many, because I know that, you're a massive goal setter. I think if there's anyone in my life that loves goal setting so much, it is you. And I highly respect you for it, because you get out there and you do achieve. What was sort of the motivation behind doing so many marathons so far?
So it is funny. I literally love goals. Like I can remember, I love goals and I love hard goals, but I can remember, this is just a quick story, being in second, third grade and becoming a Girl Scout. And all of a sudden we went to a meeting and they gave us this little booklet, and it was the Girl Scout booklet badge where you had to like read this paragraph and over time accomplish what was set out in that paragraph, whether it was cooking and like serving. And then you got a badge and you sewed it on. And literally that was like a light in my life, was to work hard towards something and then get a little badge. I realized like that's what the marathons were. But what happened is, after I think it was, I don't remember the exact timing or how it came to be, but with my friend Suzanne, we decided to run that first marathon. And then we were like, why don't we try to run 10 marathons in 10 years in 10 states? Like it was through an inspiration of somebody else's, a running book that someone ran, 50 marathons in 50 days,
Right.
I think Dean, and so I was like, what if we did 10 marathons in 10 states in 10 days? And so 10 years. So that's how it started, once a year. So that was really being inspired by somebody else's even bigger goal and then forming it into our own.
I absolutely love it. And, is there anything that's kind of like, because we talk about self-development and growth throughout each marathon, do you reflect on sort of your previous marathons? Like, is there a little bit of like reflection that goes on each year during the time that you sort of do this marathon?
So I don't know that I always would keep like afterwards a lesson. There's always some defining moments. Every marathon has like a few stories attached to it. But over the years, each marathon typically had like a different reason for why, like what was the why behind it. And, sometimes it was because we were going somewhere that it was warmer and we wanted to just see the city, or, learn something about the town. So not necessarily comparison back, from one to another, but I can say this, and for anybody that's out there that's learning and growing and stretching and changing and developing a goal, it is like a stacking methodology that like what I do know now to what I knew then it's like incredible how much you learn, and you can just stack each experience on, which makes the next one typically usually that much better. And just one quick example of that is like running New York City. I think I ran the whole thing without gel, not knowing I had to fuel my body, or I needed carbs or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I bonked at the end and hit the wall and like barely finished, I was like, oh my gosh, that was hard. But really, it's just, I think that the reflection is reminders of what you can do to even build the muscle to get stronger. And I'm not talking about your physical muscle, probably more like mental and just like the learning.
And so how did you move into the space of sort of half marathons, and most recently, which I certainly want to talk to you about, is a full Ironman?
Yes. So when we met, you'll remember we were in a group, and it was through Suri's mastermind, but I ended up meeting two people that were signed up to do Utah, St. George, the half Ironman. And they were like, just like power of suggestion, Kerry, you should do it. It's like when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself, there's definitely some inspiration, motivation. And I was like, oh no, I think I had tried like a few sprint triathlons, and I was like, no, that's my niece's wedding. I can't do it. Oh, it's a pandemic. I can't do it. So usually like someone tells you something and I sometimes if someone tells me something, I'm always like, my first place might be like, oh, that like sounds too hard. I don't know if I could do it. But if someone tells me I can't do something, then I'm doing something. But in the first marathon, that was like a deep seated story, just to rewind for a moment, where one of my husband's friends had said like, you could never run a marathon. And that stuck with me for 10 years. And I did. So that's just the youngest of 9 kids, competitive juices flowing.
Right.
But the transition to the Ironman, it was November. It was like, just, after like a lot of COVID time, feeling really dull and almost just like lacking a whole spark. A light went out inside of me. And I think it was just over that year, not having anything, 10 marathons in 10 years was over. And so like one day it just, comes to you sometimes. And I was like, yes, say yes. And my one friend, I think, Skylar, she said, just sign up. And if you can't go, you can't go, like defer. So that's how it started. And that started the path of learning, growing, lessons, training, getting in the pool, getting on the bike. And then my friend Julie, who's also was in the group that we did in Utah, we finished that one together. She basically was like, you should do a full Ironman. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I could never. And then never say never.
Right.
So I did my first full in November in Cozumel, Mexico. And I loved it. It was amazing. Such a great journey. Not the experience, the marathon, the Ironman itself was like filled with a few things, but I love that. But I really love the journey and the discipline.
Yeah, talk to me more about that because, it's certainly no easy feat. And anyone that I've ever met that has completed like a full Ironman is really, really proud of that experience. And, I've certainly not done it. So I can only sort of learn from the way people share. And it's incredibly interesting. Sort of talk me through starting to move into that space because I feel like it's a pretty big jump going from someone that's kind of like in the space of not being super athletic when you're young to kind of moving into walking to jogging and then to doing some marathons and then you do the half Ironman and now all of a sudden you're doing a full Ironman in your 50s is just absolutely phenomenal. For people that are listening that may be, just needing that little bit of inspiration, a little bit of taster of learning through someone else's story, could you share a little bit more deeper about that journey, particularly in relation to your mindset throughout that experience?
Yes. Again, I think everyone is unique and comparison, as Eleanor Roosevelt says, is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. So running your race or setting your goal or doing what feels right to you is most important. Just setting something that matters. And for me, it was deep inside. I can remember hearing once years and years and years ago of Ironman and thinking like, oh, that was the coolest thing. So for me personally, having a value of achievement, it worked. And that's why I said it. One of the areas that I really have a big belief in is that it is something you have to have your mindset around belief. Belief it's possible. So I started looking up people that were my age and looking at the span of time and understanding like what it would take. And so I did definitely see vision is really important. I believe you have to have vision, to get started. Like you have to have that kind of like fire in your belly or a little nudge or a little like message yearning, whatever we want to call it. So the vision was like starting to imagine what if. After my friend Julie said, you should do a full in Cozumel, she was very specific. But part of the vision is knowing that you can and having that belief. So that was the mindset. And once I decide I'm going to do something, I really have a hard time not finishing. And so I know that about myself, but I will say that the game changers in this part of like starting with the vision was moving into how I could collaborate and align with others because I didn't do it alone. It was so many people that supported me, friends and family, just asking you, saying like, how's it going? What's happening? Amanda in our group, we've done a mastermind or kind of an accountability cluster. So people's care and concern was part of the fuel or the rocket fuel, I'd call it. The other is, learning, reading. There's resources that you can hire a coach, but there's resources that are also just books and you could read and joining the Facebook group so that I could get knowledge and education. I found a mentor, someone that had done Cozumel in a few towns away. And she was so invaluable, like just Emily sharing her experience, her story. So the vision and the alignment or collaboration was really, really, really important. On the mindset piece, there was a lot of times it's a roller coaster. There was days that I was like, I am out of my mind. I'm not going to be able to do this. Or, you have a really hard day on the bike or you're tired. But I just kept thinking about like, yes, you can be willing to compromise on your goal, be willing to not even compromise. Let me reframe that. It was more like, give yourself a bigger window, go easy, have some grace. And I remember you one time said something of your own ultra experience and it stuck with me, Jennah-Louise. It was so powerful, but like, you were like, you ended up connecting to how am I in this moment? It was one of your like overnight ultras, how am I in this moment connecting with nature? And so I really would just stay present. And that was a big part of my mindset. And how can I shift from those away values that are like, negative and reframe and refocus and go towards my values that would bring me gratitude, noticing things around me in nature, noticing that like there's people that can't.
Right.
And so
That's a
that
big
was
one.
really a part of the mindset for me, was like, call yourself out on it. It's not going to be easy, but pain is temporary. Pride is forever. Like, stick to your goal, work your plan. And I think that was a really critical part.
And on the day, as we know with these endurance type events, there isn't a whole lot that goes to plan. And that's kind of the fun of it, right? It's the growth part. And upon reflection, after we're well fed and rested, we can appreciate. On that day, there were a few things that, didn't go to plan. What was sort of like your self-talk throughout sort of coming up against these challenges?
So my self-talk, and I started at the very beginning at the swim, I was like, party like it's like New Year's Eve party, like shake your booty, dance and have fun. So I'm a big believer in your body. Like I would like bend over. I get up in the morning, I try to smile first, I touch my toes. But that day I was all about like, bring your energy. And you want to be, aware, like I'm not doing 50 push-ups and jumping jacks to drain my energy, but I was keeping my mind and my body in a really primed state. And so that was really important. I was looking to make others laugh and smile, noticing people's eye color and looking at them and acting goofy. And that little like magic part of me, like that, playful side, like set the right energy. So that was really a way to kick it off. The swim was beautiful. It was pouring rain, by the way, like at the start of the swim. So I say it was beautiful, but really like my goggles were all like dripping with water, but it did stop. And it was just, connecting to my heart, feeling my heart, literally staying present in my body and just being grateful that this is a day that this is not what I've worked towards. Like the journey has been the learning all the way through, and to go in and just enjoy my hard work and celebrate that day. So I really did I had the mindset of keep going, but celebration, serving others, and finding what's right in the day versus focusing on what's wrong.
Right. And I know that you sort of mentioned this before, visualization is incredibly important to you and a massive part of, what I know that you're very passionate about is having sort of a toolkit or a toolbox. And I know on this particular day, it was really profound, the results that you had from visualization. Can you sort of share what visualization is to you, what that looks like and how it manifested for you?
Yes, it really is probably the tool in my toolkit that has, in any facet of my life, what has been one of the tools that has served me so profoundly. And that is by journaling and writing out a mental rehearsal of the event, the activity, the goal. So whether it's a dear future self letter and it's 6 months away from the event, which I did those, just like practicing mentally, building your muscle. And a lot of that I learned from Dr. Joe Dispenza on like his version of visualization, but I would write things out. But the morning of, I got up, it was 4 a.m. in Mexico, and I typed out on my iPhone. Normally I like markers and white paper and colors and bubble charts, as you know,
Yes.
But for this one, and I had done a few versions, but for this one, it was the morning of, it was 4 a.m. I literally wrote a mental rehearsal segment by segment. I'm going to the start. This is what it felt like. This is what was happening around me. What was happening in the swim, and what I did on the transition, what I did on the bike, what I saw, how I felt, all in what I was seeking to find. So I did my mental rehearsal as aspirational. And the very last line I wrote, "Congratulations, Kerry, you did it. You are an Ironman," with an exclamation point. "You finished in 14:11." And I put a little icon of like the heart, the red heart. And I finished in 14:12, 1 minute off.
So amazing.
And my advice, and maybe this isn't even advice, but what I would hope to pay forward on that visualization process is that sometimes and we know this, there's going to be unexpected things, but not going through the mental rehearsal in the way that you want to handle adversity, or in the way that you could set up, the positive state of what you want to see aspirationally, as I said, was really important. But I did also go through the same activity as if something were to go wrong. So if I had a bike flat, then I would take a deep breath, stay calm. And so that I didn't do that on the morning of, but I do just want to share with everybody, I do that throughout. Is risk mitigation is really important, because sometimes we can't be like falsely positive. We have to be neutral, and we have to kind of realize that there's things that could, as you said, a lot goes on, like things go wrong, things are unexpected.
Yeah, I think that's such an important element that I think a lot of people don't actually share when we talk about visualization. It's kind of like, what would your perfect race look like, or your perfect day, or your ideal life? But it doesn't set you up. And I think even Siri sort of talks about this, who's like a 2 times world champion in triathlon. She sort of shared her story of getting into triathlon and getting into visualization and having sort of this perfect event mapped out in her mind, only for it to not be perfect on the day. And she really sort of had a challenge on that day. So it's just as important to be able to mentally rehearse if things go wrong and sort of be prepared, because if they do, you will be able to sort of be able to meet them, as you're sharing, with a lot more presence and grace, and still be able to continue on with that achievement. And you mentioned positivity, and I know this is so incredibly important to you. And I would love for you to share more about, your view on positivity, because I've seen a lot of your posts and a lot of them include positivity, but it seems like included in your post, there is this idea that sort of people have pushback, like, oh, I don't want to be naive, or, I don't want to like sort of dismiss the negative. Like, there are negatives in this life. And I think sometimes people can kind of misunderstand the concept of positivity and how to use it practically in life. Could you sort of share more about that? And particularly in relation, you're an executive coach. I know this is part of, what you preach, a practice that you preach. So yeah, just share a little bit more about that.
Yes. So for the first 2-3 chapters of my life, I just believed in positivity. I just wired my brain that way, that it was like sunshine and daisies and hearts and life is grand. And, I just believed in being positive. And if someone called me and said, like, I'm having a problem, I'd be their cheerleader, but I'd also like be like, it's going to be okay. Like, I really always thought a positivity was the way that I wanted to be. And I do value positivity and optimism. That's just something that I really do hold in high regard. I've learned to connect that with possibility. So from like a more strategic lens. And I think that's where, as I've entered into like my 40s or my 50s, I started recognizing and learning and researching and exploring that, you can choose happy. That's what the plaque is in my kitchen. And on my desk, it says the world awaits. And, like I can have these motivational, inspirational slogans and beliefs, but I also learned, like through my own hardships at times, that things don't always go as planned. And that, even at one point in my life, I relocated with a family of 5 and things didn't work out for multiple reasons. And we relocated back. So in 1 year, I had 6 addresses, so moving, many times. And I think that's probably one of the defining moments of where I recognize that you have to look at strategy and possibility, but you also have to be realistic. And so sometimes I don't believe in negativity. I really repel negativity. I do. And it's like in my core, but I might have to sit in more of a neutral space. And there was some work by Trevor Mowad, and It Takes What It Takes. And actually my son, Wes, who's 20, called me one day and he's like, Mom, that post is a little bit too positive. Like, what if someone's going through something? And, like,
Interesting.
and I recognize that. And so I think it's more about choose positive, like look to find what's right, have the belief in possibility and the strategy. And you have to have pause and breathe and take care of like your well-being. And that's what my goal is in life, is to support people to find their growth, like be willing to grow and have that achievement, but also the vitality. And so in 2016, I formed Growtality, which is really about helping people, including myself, grow, but also find vitality. And that is, to me, kind of the merging of taking hard work and achievement, having that vision, and having that alignment with others. But then in order to execute, you really have to be willing to know that there's a balance, and it's kind of the blend between.
And what do you think, as we sort of shared, you are an executive coach, and I'd love to learn more about sort of the high performance mindset that you sort of practice in your own coaching business, and sort of in the way that we can sort of relate it, I guess, to like more of a general listener type group versus just high achievers. Yeah, I'd love to learn, because when we have this conversation, you speak about gratitude and positivity, and it's interesting because I've coached a few executives in my lifetime too, and it's interesting the pushback that you initially receive sometimes from people, because a lot of these sort of type A high achieving personalities cannot necessarily initially relate to this kind of like more positive gratitude kind of energy. And I know that you and I were very much pulled to Siri Lindley in this, as well as like coming to understand how you can truly achieve everything that you want in life, but it doesn't have to be this kind of like, grit and grind kind of energy. As you're saying, like, the lack of vitality that is sort of present in a lot of high achievers. How can we bring more of that sense of growth and vitality as a high performer or a high achiever into our own life?
Yes. It's in an executive coaching space. And I also do a lot of facilitation of team workshops and, just working with leaders across the globe. It's very difficult at times to connect to the love, the gratitude. I think really solid leaders are looking to serve. And so it's getting this you out of the key character in the story and making it about supporting and giving and helping others. And so for high achievers, for athletes, for any of those types of, individuals that are listening, I think it really becomes about, what is your end? Like, what does success really look like? What does that mean? I mean, there's so many facets of success, but when I look to coach um, executives, anyone, really just people, and this, it's, what are your values? Like, what matters most to you? And when you peel the onion down, people want to be seen and they want to be heard.
Yeah.
They also want to give. People want to help. And so often it's, you may be masking, or you may have a block on what you really believe is why you're doing what you're doing. But I think it's connecting and helping them. Because what I've learned is I'm not giving the answers. I'm getting curious. I'm asking. I may help with the strategy and from a consulting piece support, but usually it's when you pause and you breathe and you start thinking about your like future state, what you're really after, you start to recognize that life is far more fulfilling. So there's the blend of achievement with fulfillment. And so that fulfillment piece is what I often try to help support, unlock, help people see within themselves. And I champion that and challenge them in the space in between coaching to be able to figure out, how do I find what that fulfillment really looks like?
That's so beautiful. And, obviously we're coming into the new year soon. And as we sort of shared, I know you're extremely passionate about goal setting. What would you sort of suggest to people that are sort of, it's been a rough couple of years. Like, let's be honest, for most of us, it's been very challenging. We've been placed in a very different situation to anything that we've all experienced before. But it seems like things are starting to move and we're starting to get back into this like quote unquote normal life. But I think a lot of us have had time to reflect on, am I happy? Do I want something different? Do I want something more? Do I want to become more of a person that, I feel is more authentic to who I am, and be in that position to contribute and give back? And there's sort of like this underlying energy of change that is happening, but a lot of us don't know how to kind of start moving in that right direction. Could you share a little bit more of what you would suggest for people that are kind of in this space of transition, and how to sort of start approaching the end of year and the beginning of 2022?
Yes. It's interesting that one of the things that you just said that kind of like was like pulsing to me is the transition and what people are experiencing. And so one of the things that I would start with is, sometimes it's not all or nothing. It's not just like one or the other. And so when I think about transition, and I even go back to grief, because there's a very similar relationship and model, there's some stages. And sometimes in the beginning, there's like this shock or frustration, or, for me, like sadness, anger, shock, whatever it is, denial. And it could be the same with like starting to come out of this, pandemic, which we're still dealing with, but that like like my life's purpose, I'm not fulfilled. I want to find like something else. And so knowing that like there's this spectrum that you kind of have to be willing to ebb and flow and step forward and step back and move into like neutral, maybe like a little bit of opportunity in the skeptic zone before you actually make that big leap or that big jump. So the metaphor I would use is the 5K to a marathon. And so yes, people want to live their values, they want to make change or transition, but I would challenge individuals to build plans, and maybe not make it all or nothing. And for some, all or nothing is going to work.
Right.
So there's not one way, there's more than one way. But for my way that I would recommend, I believe you always, you want to have a vision or an outcome that you're seeking. For me, it's goals, small, medium, or large. And usually before I finish one goal, I'm looking for another, because otherwise I may feel like an extreme letdown. And that's, again, just my style. But for those out there that are like, I don't even know if I'm in the right career, am I wanting to do I know what I want my next endurance event, or what do I want my, life to look like in the next chapter? Do some journaling, do some, practices of meditation, gratitude. I recently started doing some of the tapping solution, so I think that I know you're doing the Hof, the
Wim
ice,
Hof.
the cold, yeah, the cold bath, the cold, I think what I would really offer is, and I'm learning and growing, and I still have a lot of imperfection here, is that sometimes we can do both. Sometimes we make a story in our head that's like, oh, I want to run a new company, or I want to start a charity. And it's like, I have to see it at the top of the mountain as if it's in its finished form. And you can work towards that vision, but remember that you have to do the climbing like step by step. And, sometimes you can do two things at the same time. I during COVID became a realtor. I got my real estate license, and, I have my coaching practice. I have my athletics. Like, it's sometimes you just have to figure out in your facets of life where you want to spend your focus and your energy, but know that it may be being patient, I guess, is really the offer here, can also help you find what you're seeking.
And we started this conversation with, talking about your life's purpose, and that is to inspire and help others grow. What do you hope to be as the biggest inspiration for others?
What do I hope to be? It's interesting. I'm going to take a little detour here. I hope to be supportive. The detour is my vision for next year, really 2021, is to make sure that I'm not sitting in my ego, to make sure that I am
Beautiful.
truly serving. And I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about them. And, giving resources, tools, whatever I can share, but again, not from me being like center stage. I think that that's been something I've really learned, that there's times my away values, even doing the Ironman, is like, I know it's attention, but I really want it to be more inspiration. And so who I want to be in this process is someone that could potentially guide and help, as a resource, as a person that can, really share, but ultimately let others find their well-being, their well-living, their well-giving, and so the be-do model matters, because I'm a doer, but I really want to be a person that's generous. I want to be inspiring, I want to be generous, but I really want it to be in service of someone else.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Kerry, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. You're a beautiful friend, a beautiful person, and I've learned so much from you, having you in my life, and I appreciate you deeply.
Jennah-Louise, thank you. I can't even tell you the light you have been. You are incredible, and I'm always inspired. There hasn't been a phone call that I'm not like, oh my goodness, I need to look up that. I need to find out this. And so you share so much, and I really just cherish and value you and our relationship. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, on a final note, Kerry, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
To me, what it means to be human is yourself, your soul. Less than perfect, but still completely enough.